Chapter 1. The Foundation. Clark Bennett stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a chessboard waiting for his next move. At 45, he had built an empire from nothing, a logistics company that moved goods across 3 states, real estate investments spanning the East Coast, and a reputation that made competitors either bow or break. But tonight, the taste of betrayal was sharper than the October wind cutting through his tailored suit. 3 hours earlier, Otto Thompson had delivered the final surveillance report. Clark's private investigator was thorough, ruthless in his attention to detail, qualities Clark demanded from everyone in his inner circle. The photographs were damning. His wife Kate wrapped in the arms of Maverick Ruiz at the Grandview Hotel, the same place Clark had proposed to her 15 years ago. Kate Phillips Bennett had been 22 when they met, a socialite from old Charleston money whose family had lost everything in bad investments. Clark was 30, hungry, and building his first warehouse. She was beautiful, refined, everything he thought he wanted in a partner as he climbed toward success. She gave him legitimacy in social circles that mattered for business. He gave her the financial security her family name could no longer provide. Daddy. Clark turned to find his daughter Lola standing in the doorway, her 17-year-old face creased with concern. She had inherited Kate's delicate features, but possessed Clark's steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. "You look angry," she said, stepping onto the balcony. "Mom's been acting weird lately, and Rowan's been defending her every time you two argue." His son Rowan, 19 and home from Duke University, had always been Kate's golden boy. Where Lola questioned everything with the sharp intelligence Clark recognized as his own, Rowan accepted whatever Kate told him with blind devotion. It would be his weakness. "Sometimes people show you who they really are," Clark said, his voice steady. "When they do, you have to decide what that information is worth." Lola studied his face. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" "That depends on several factors that are still being evaluated." The girl was smart enough to recognize a non-answer. She nodded and squeezed his arm. "Whatever happens, I'm on your side. You know that, right?" Clark felt something crack inside his chest, not from pain, but from the cold satisfaction of knowing he had at least one ally in the coming war. "I know." After Lola went to bed, Clark reviewed Otto's complete file. Maverick Ruiz, 38, owned a string of upscale restaurants and had been quietly courting investors for a new venture in Miami. More importantly, he had been Kate's college boyfriend, the one she claimed to have forgotten completely. The affair had been going on for 8 months. Kate had been careful, but not careful enough. She'd used the same credit card for hotel rooms, thinking Clark never checked the statements. She'd told the same lies about book club meetings and spa days, not realizing Otto had been watching. But the most interesting detail was in Maverick's financial records. The man was leveraged to the breaking point, desperate for capital to keep his restaurants afloat. His affair with Kate wasn't just passion, it was calculation. He needed her to push Clark toward investing in his Miami project. Clark poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat behind his oak desk, the same one where he'd signed his first $1 million contract. Tomorrow, he would set the board. But tonight, he would plan every move 3 steps ahead, the way he always did. His phone buzzed. A text from Kate. "Book club running late. Don't wait up." At that moment, Clark decided Kate and Maverick had made their last mistake. He would not divorce his wife quietly or settle for half his assets. He would not forgive, and he would not forget. They had chosen to play a game against a man who had never lost, and now they would learn the true cost of betrayal. Clark deleted the text without responding and opened his laptop. Phase 1 of his plan would begin tomorrow with a single phone call to Brian Cook, his attorney and oldest friend. By the time Clark was finished, Kate and Maverick would understand that some men could be pushed, bent, or broken. But Clark Bennett was not one of them. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. Brian Cook's law office occupied the top floor of a glass tower downtown, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that commanded respect. Clark had known Brian since college. They'd been roommates, business partners in their first failed venture, and allies in every major deal since. If Clark was the hammer, Brian was the precision instrument that made sure every strike landed exactly where intended. "How long have you known?" Brian asked, reviewing Otto's surveillance file while his secretary brought coffee neither man would touch. "I suspected for months. Confirmed it 3 days ago." Clark's voice carried no emotion, but Brian caught the slight tightening around his eyes. 25 years of friendship had taught him to read Clark's subtle tells. This is comprehensive work. Otto earns his fee. Brian closed the folder and leaned back in his leather chair. So what's the play? Standard dissolution? I can have papers drawn up by. No. Clark's interruption was sharp. Kate thinks she's been clever. She thinks I'm some corporate drone who'll roll over for a settlement. She's about to learn how wrong she is. Brian raised an eyebrow. Clark, I've seen you destroy competitors for less than this. But this is your family. Your kids. My kids made their choices. Rowan parrots everything Kate tells him. Lola sees through her mother's lies. Clark stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the morning skyline. Kate wants to play games? I'll give her a game. What do you need from me? First, I want you to quietly prepare everything for a contested divorce. Assume she'll fight for half of everything. Second, I need you to research the property laws in 3 states. I have some assets Kate doesn't know about. Clark turned back to his friend. Third, I need to understand exactly what rights she has to the businesses. Brian was already taking notes. The logistics company is solely in your name. The real estate holdings are more complicated. Some are joint property, some aren't. The house is joint ownership, but you made the down payment and all mortgage payments from your personal accounts. Good. Now, what can you tell me about alienation of affection laws? Brian's pen stopped moving. Clark, what can you tell me? North Carolina still recognizes it. You could theoretically sue Maverick Ruiz for damages related to the destruction of your marriage. But it's rarely used anymore, and research it. I want to know every option. After leaving Brian's office, Clark drove to his flagship warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The facility buzzed with controlled chaos, trucks loading, supervisors coordinating schedules, the steady rhythm of commerce that had built his fortune. He found his operations manager, Albert Parson, reviewing shipping manifests in the main office. Albert, I need you to restructure our Miami shipping contracts. Cancel the Grandview Restaurant Group account effective immediately. Albert looked up, confused. Sir? That's Maverick Ruiz's company. We've been negotiating expanded service with them. The contract alone is worth. I know what it's worth. Cancel it. May I ask why? Clark met Albert's eyes, and the younger man immediately understood the conversation was over. Send the cancellation notice today. Site operational restructuring. No further explanation needed. As Albert hurried away, Clark allowed himself a thin smile. Maverick's restaurants depended on timely delivery of specialty ingredients from suppliers across the Southeast. Without Clark's logistics network, Maverick would need to find new shipping companies, at rates 20% higher and with significantly less reliability. That evening, Clark returned home to find Kate in the kitchen, preparing dinner with unusual enthusiasm. She wore a new dress, navy blue silk that complemented her auburn hair, and had opened a bottle of expensive wine. You're home early, she said, kissing his cheek with practiced affection. I thought we could have dinner together. Just us. The kids are both out. Clark accepted the wine glass she offered, studying her face. Kate was still beautiful at 37, still carried herself with the poise that had first attracted him. But now he could see the calculation behind her smile, the way she monitored his reactions for any sign of suspicion. How was book club last night? He asked, sitting at the kitchen island. Oh, you know how it is. Cora Hammond dominates every discussion. We spent 2 hours debating some romance novel. Kate turned back to the stove, her shoulders relaxing slightly. How was your day? Productive. Made some changes to our Miami operations. Miami. Kate's voice was carefully neutral, but Clark caught the slight stiffening of her posture. I thought you were expanding there. Plans change. Sometimes you discover that potential partners aren't as reliable as they appear. Kate nodded and continued stirring the sauce, but Clark saw her hand tremble slightly. She knew, not everything, but enough to realize her timeline had just accelerated. After dinner, Kate suggested they watch a movie, another unusual gesture that confirmed Clark's suspicions. She was working harder to maintain normalcy, which meant Maverick was pressuring her to push for Clark's investment in his Miami project. As they sat on the couch, Kate curled against his side with calculated intimacy. Clark's phone buzzed with a text from Otto. MR seen at Grandview Bar. Appears agitated. Do you want continued surveillance? Clark typed back. Yes. All movements. All contacts. Kate noticed his phone activity. Work, always work. Clark set the phone aside and wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, feeling her relax into what she thought was safety. But Clark was already 3 moves ahead. Tomorrow, he would visit the bank to restructure certain accounts Kate had access to. By the end of the week, he would own properties she didn't know existed. And within a month, he would control every piece of the chessboard except the 2 pieces that thought they were playing him. Kate and Maverick believed they were seducing a successful but naive husband into financing their future together. They had no idea they were already trapped in a game where Clark had written all the rules. The only question remaining was how much damage they would inflict on themselves before they realized they had never been the hunters. They had always been the prey. Chapter 3. The Setup. 2 weeks into October, Clark's plan crystallized with the precision of a surgeon's blade. He had spent the morning in Brian Cook's office, reviewing documents that would fundamentally reshape his family's future, though only he knew it yet. The Wyoming LLC is established, Brian reported, sliding papers across his desk. Bennett Holdings now owns your 3 most valuable properties through a subsidiary Kate has no legal claim to. We've transferred them technically as business assets. And the bank accounts. The personal joint account remains active with enough funds to avoid suspicion. But your primary assets have been moved to accounts established before your marriage. Brian's expression remained professionally neutral, but Clark detected unease. Clark, what you're doing is legal, but nothing. Kate chose to violate our marriage contract. I'm simply protecting what's mine. That afternoon, Clark met Otto Thompson at a downtown coffee shop, the kind of anonymous place where 2 men could discuss surveillance without attracting attention. Otto was a compact man in his 50s, formerly DEA, who had transitioned to private investigation after an injury ended his federal career. Maverick's getting desperate, Otto reported, sliding a manila envelope across the table. His primary investor for the Miami project pulled out yesterday. Apparently, some logistics issues with his supply chain. Clark almost smiled. Unfortunate. He's been meeting with Kate twice a week now. Always at the Grandview Hotel, always room 412. But yesterday's meeting was different, more intense. She left crying. He's pressuring her to approach me directly about the investment. That would be my read. There's something else. Otto leaned forward slightly. I followed Kate to the bank yesterday. She attempted to access your joint safety deposit box. The bank manager informed her she needed your signature. Clark felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Kate was getting bolder, more careless. Perfect. Keep watching. I want to know every move they make. That evening, Clark arrived home to find his son Rowan in the living room, fresh from Duke for a surprise visit. At 19, Rowan had inherited Kate's refined features and Clark's height, but lacked the hardness that came from building something from nothing. He was idealistic, trusting, qualities Clark had once considered virtues. Dad, we need to talk. Rowan's voice carried an edge of confrontation that Clark recognized immediately. About. Mom's been upset lately. Really upset. She thinks you're pulling away from the family. Rowan stood, trying to match his father's presence. She's afraid you're planning to leave us. Clark studied his son's face, seeing Kate's coaching in every word. And what do you think? I think Mom deserves better than being treated like a stranger in her own house. The words hung in the air between them, and Clark felt something fundamental shift. His son, the boy he had taught to throw a baseball, helped with homework, supported through every phase of growing up, had chosen sides without understanding the game. Your mother deserves exactly what she's earned, Clark said quietly. What does that mean? It means I suggest you be very careful about the accusations you make without understanding all the facts. Rowan's jaw tightened. Are you threatening me? I'm advising you. As your father. Clark moved closer, and despite being nearly the same height, Rowan involuntarily stepped back. You're 19 years old. You think you understand the world, but you don't understand the first thing about loyalty, about trust, about what it means to build something worth protecting. I understand that you're being cruel to Mom for no reason. No reason. Clark repeated the words as if tasting poison. I'll remember you said that. Later that night, after Rowan had stormed out to stay at a friend's house, Clark found Lola in the kitchen, making her usual late-night snack. His daughter looked up from her sandwich with eyes that had seen too much for 17. Rowan's an idiot, she said simply. Why do you say that? Because he thinks Mom is some innocent victim, and he's too naive to see what's really happening. Lola took a bite and studied her father's face. But you're not naive, are you? Clark sat across from his daughter, recognizing his own analytical nature reflected in her sharp gaze. What do you think is happening? I think Mom's having an affair. I think Rowan knows it, but won't admit it because it would shatter his perfect image of her. And I think you're planning to do something about it. Lola set down her sandwich. The question is whether you're going to destroy everyone in the process, or just the people who deserve it. The directness of her assessment surprised even Clark. And what would you do in my position? I'd make sure the people who betrayed me understood the consequences of their choices. Lola's voice carried a hardness that reminded Clark of himself at her age. But I'd also make sure the people who stood by me knew they were protected. Clark reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. You'll never have to worry about being protected. The next morning brought a call Clark had been expecting. Kate's voice was strained, artificially casual. Honey, I was wondering if we could have lunch today. There's something I wanted to discuss with you. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Could we meet at the Grandview? They have that lovely dining room you used to like. The Grandview Hotel. The same place where she met Maverick twice a week. The same place where Clark had proposed 15 years ago. The symbolism was either deliberate cruelty or stunning obtuseness. 1 o'clock, Clark said. Perfect. I love you. I'll see you there. As Clark ended the call, he felt the familiar calm that came before decisive action. Kate and Maverick had finally pushed him into making his offer, convinced they were manipulating him into funding their escape together. They had no idea that by the time he finished lunch, they would be caught in a trap they had helped build themselves. Phase 2 was about to begin, and unlike the first phase, Kate would soon realize she was no longer playing house with a trusting husband. She was about to face Clark Bennett at full strength, and mercy was not in his vocabulary. Chapter 4. The Trap Springs. The Grandview Hotel's dining room carried the weight of old money and older secrets, its mahogany-paneled walls having witnessed 3 generations of Charleston's elite celebrating triumphs and negotiating disasters. Clark arrived 5 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered clear sight lines to both entrances, a habit from his early business days when every meeting could be an ambush. Kate entered precisely on time, wearing a cream-colored dress that made her auburn hair glow under the crystal chandeliers. She moved with practiced grace toward his table, and Clark watched her perform the role of devoted wife for the benefit of anyone who might be observing. You look tired, she said, kissing his cheek before sitting across from him. Have you been sleeping well? Well enough. Clark signaled the waiter. What did you want to discuss? Kate's smile faltered slightly at his directness, but she recovered quickly. Can't a wife simply want to have lunch with her husband? She can, but that's not why we're here. For a moment, Kate's mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Then she composed herself and leaned forward with conspiratorial intimacy. Actually, you're right. I do have something to discuss. She paused while the waiter took their orders, then continued in a lower voice. I've been thinking about investments. New opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Well, you know how you're always looking for ways to expand the business. I met someone at Cora Hammond's charity event who mentioned an interesting restaurant venture in Miami. High-end places, very exclusive clientele. Clark's expression remained neutral, though internally he marveled at her performance. Restaurant ventures are notoriously risky. This one seems different. The owner has a proven track record, established relationships with suppliers. Kate's voice gained enthusiasm as she warmed to her script. His name is Maverick Ruiz. I thought maybe you could meet with him, just to explore possibilities. Maverick Ruiz. Clark let the name hang in the air, watching Kate's micro-expressions. How well do you know him? Not very well. We've talked a few times at social events. The lie came smoothly, but Clark caught the slight dilation of her pupils, the barely perceptible tightening around her eyes. He seems very professional, very focused. I see. And you believe I should invest in his restaurants based on casual conversation at charity events? Kate's jaw tensed at his skeptical tone. I'm not saying you should do anything. I'm suggesting you explore an opportunity that could be profitable for both of you. Clark nodded slowly, as if considering her proposal. All right. Set up a meeting. Kate's relief was immediate and obvious. Really? You'll meet with him? I'll meet with him. But Kate. Clark leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I want you to understand something very clearly. If I discover that your interest in this venture is anything other than concern for my business success, there will be consequences you haven't considered." The color drained from Kate's face. "Clark, I don't understand what you're—" "I think you understand perfectly." Clark smiled, but it was the smile of a predator who had just shown his teeth. "Now, shall we enjoy our lunch?" The remainder of their meal passed in tense civility, Kate's attempts at normal conversation falling flat against Clark's polite but distant responses. When they parted in the hotel lobby, Kate promised to arrange the meeting with Maverick, her voice high and strained. Clark waited until she had driven away, then walked to the hotel bar where Otto Thompson sat nursing a whiskey and pretending to read a newspaper. "Did you get it all?" Clark asked, sliding into the adjacent booth. Otto nodded and tapped the recording device on the table between them. Crystal clear audio. She definitely knows Maverick better than casual conversation at charity events. She'll call him within the hour. He'll be panicked. They've been planning this approach for weeks, and now they have to execute it knowing I'm suspicious. What's the next move? Clark checked his watch. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll meet with Maverick Ruiz at his restaurant. He'll give me his presentation, thinking he's manipulating a suspicious but ultimately gullible husband. What he won't know is that I've already researched every aspect of his business, his personal life, and his relationship with my wife. And then I give him exactly what he thinks he wants. Otto raised an eyebrow. You're going to invest in his restaurants? I'm going to make him an offer that will destroy everything he values most. And he'll accept it because he won't understand what he's agreeing to until it's too late. Clark stood, straightening his suit jacket. By the time I'm finished with both of them, they'll have handed me every weapon I need to dismantle their lives piece by piece. That evening, Clark returned home to find Rowan waiting in his study, clearly agitated. Mom told me about your lunch today, Rowan said without preamble. She said you were cruel to her. Threatening. Clark settled behind his desk, observing his son's defensive posture. Did she mention why we were having lunch? She said she was trying to help your business and you accused her of having ulterior motives. And what do you think of that explanation? Rowan's hands clenched into fists. I think you're being paranoid and cruel to a woman who's done nothing but support you for 15 years. Clark opened his laptop and turned it toward his son. On the screen were surveillance photos from Otto's file. Kate and Maverick entering the Grandview Hotel, their bodies pressed together in intimate conversation, Maverick's hand on Kate's thigh in the hotel bar. Rowan stared at the images, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and denial. This isn't what it looks like. What does it look like? I don't know, but Mom wouldn't, she's not. Rowan's voice trailed off as he saw more photos. Kate and Maverick kissing outside the hotel, her hand cupping his face with obvious tenderness. Your mother has been having an affair for 8 months, Clark said quietly. She's been using you and your sister as cover for her deception. And now she's trying to manipulate me into funding her lover's business so they can steal my money along with everything else. Rowan's legs gave out, and he collapsed into the chair across from Clark's desk. No, this has to be some kind of mistake. The only mistake was trusting her in the first place. Dad, please. Maybe they're just friends who. Rowan. Clark's voice cut through his son's desperate rationalizations. Look at me. Slowly, Rowan raised his eyes to meet his father's gaze. Your mother betrayed our family. She betrayed our marriage. She betrayed me. Clark's voice carried no emotion, just cold fact. Tomorrow, I'm going to begin the process of making sure she pays for those choices. You can accept that reality and stand with your family, or you can continue defending someone who has been lying to you for months. But you cannot do both. Rowan stared at the photos again, his world visibly crumbling. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What are you going to do to her? Clark's smile was sharp as winter steel. I'm going to give her exactly what she deserves. Chapter 5. The Meeting. Maverick Ruiz's flagship restaurant, Coastal, occupied a prime corner in Charleston's historic district, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering diners views of the harbor while they enjoyed what food critics called elevated Southern cuisine with Latin influences. Clark arrived 15 minutes early, studying the elegant interior that spoke of significant investment and refined taste. Maverick appeared promptly at 3 o'clock, extending his hand with the confidence of a man who believed he was about to close the deal of his lifetime. At 38, he was handsome in a way that women found dangerous. dark hair with silver threading the temples, olive skin that suggested Mediterranean heritage, and the kind of smile that promised secrets. Mr. Bennett, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know your time is valuable. Clark accepted the handshake, noting Maverick's firm grip and steady eye contact. The man was a skilled performer. He'd give him that. Kate spoke highly of your restaurants. I'm curious about your expansion plans. They settled at a corner table, and Maverick launched into his presentation with practiced enthusiasm. The Miami project was ambitious. 3 high-end restaurants in South Beach, targeting wealthy tourists and locals with disposable income. He had architectural plans, market research, projected revenue streams, and testimonials from satisfied investors. The initial investment would be $2.5 million, Maverick concluded, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. Conservative projections show profitability within 18 months, with potential for significant expansion throughout Florida. Clark reviewed the documents with the careful attention that had made him successful, asking pointed questions about supply chains, labor costs, and competition analysis. Maverick's answers were thorough and confident, revealing a man who genuinely understood his business. Impressive work, Clark said finally. You've clearly done your research. Maverick's smile broadened. I believe in being thorough. This isn't just about making money. It's about building something lasting. Something lasting. Clark repeated the phrase thoughtfully. That's interesting, coming from a man who specializes in destroying other people's lasting relationships. The change in Maverick's expression was immediate and complete. Color drained from his face, his confident posture collapsing as if Clark had struck him physically. I'm not sure what you mean. Clark leaned back in his chair, his voice remaining conversational despite the lethal content. 8 months, Maverick. 8 months you've been fucking my wife in hotel rooms while she lies to our children about book clubs and charity events. Maverick's hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. Mr. Bennett, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Room 412 at the Grandview Hotel. Every Tuesday and Friday afternoon. You prefer champagne, she prefers wine. Last Thursday, she cried when you told her I needed to commit to the Miami investment or you'd end the relationship. Clark's smile was razor thin. Did I misunderstand anything? Maverick's face had gone gray, sweat beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. Look, Kate and it's complicated. She was unhappy, lonely. So you were providing comfort to my neglected wife out of the goodness of your heart. It wasn't supposed to happen. We were friends in college, and when we reconnected, you saw an opportunity. Clark's voice hardened. A beautiful woman married to a wealthy man, perfect for both your emotional and financial needs. Maverick straightened, apparently deciding to abandon pretense. What do you want, Bennett? I want to make you an offer. The statement clearly wasn't what Maverick had expected. An offer? Clark reopened the investment portfolio, studying the financial projections with apparent interest. $2.5 million for 30% equity in your Miami restaurants, but with some modifications to the standard terms. Maverick blinked in confusion. You're actually considering the investment? I'm considering it very seriously. You see, Maverick, you and Kate made a fundamental error in your planning. You assumed I was some corporate drone who'd roll over when his wife found a new playmate. You never considered that I might be someone who turns obstacles into opportunities. Clark pulled out his own documents, contracts his legal team had prepared over the past week. Here's what I'm offering. Full funding for your Miami project, with you maintaining 70% ownership. In exchange, I want personal guarantees backed by your existing restaurants, your personal residence, and your family's restaurant in Miami. Yes, I know about your mother's place. Maverick reviewed the contracts, his confusion growing. These terms, they're actually favorable to me. Why would you? Because I believe in investing in people who understand the value of loyalty. Clark's smile was sharp. And because I want you to succeed, Maverick. I want your restaurants to flourish, your reputation to grow, your bank account to expand. I don't understand. You will. Clark stood, straightening his suit jacket. Take the weekend to review the contracts. Have your attorney examine every clause. If you agree to the terms, we'll close on Monday. Maverick remained seated, staring at the documents as if they might explode. Why are you doing this? Clark moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Because in 6 months, when you're completely dependent on my capital and my business connections, When your success is tied to my goodwill, I'm going to destroy you so thoroughly that you'll spend the rest of your life understanding what it means to betray Clark Bennett. The blood drained from Maverick's face as the trap became visible. The contracts are ironclad, Maverick. My lawyers wrote them specifically to give you enough rope to hang yourself. Your personal guarantees mean that when your restaurants fail, and they will fail because I control the supply chains you depend on, you'll lose everything. Your house, your mother's restaurant, your reputation, your future. Clark straightened, his voice returning to normal conversational tones. But here's the beautiful part. It will all be completely legal. You'll sign documents giving me the right to call in my investment at any time, backed by assets worth 3 times what I'm lending you. When I exercise that right, you'll have 30 days to repay $2.5 million you've already spent. Maverick's hands shook as he gripped the table edge. You're insane. I'm thorough. Just like you said, I believe in building something lasting. And what I'm building is a lesson that will follow you for the rest of your life. Clark picked up his briefcase. Kate thinks she's getting away with betraying our marriage. You think you're getting away with destroying my family. But you're both about to learn that some men don't just get mad, they get creative. Clark walked toward the restaurant's exit, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Maverick? Tell Kate I said hello. Tell her the game is just beginning. As Clark left the restaurant, he could see Maverick through the window, staring at the contracts with the expression of a man who had just realized he was drowning. Phase 3 was about to begin, and soon both Kate and Maverick would understand that they had never been playing against a husband and business rival. They had been playing against a master, and the game was already over. Chapter 6. The Choice. Clark's phone buzzed at 11:30 p.m., displaying Kate's number for the 3rd time in an hour. He let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on the financial documents spread across his home office desk. Maverick's restaurant empire, detailed down to monthly utility bills and supplier contracts, painted a picture of ambitious overextension held together by charm and increasingly desperate cash flow management. The 4th call came at midnight. This time, Clark answered. You've been busy today. Kate's voice was strained, artificial calm barely concealing panic. I had a productive meeting with your friend Maverick. Interesting business opportunity. Clark, we need to talk. Now. It's midnight, Kate. Surely whatever you need to discuss can wait until morning. Don't play games with me. The mask slipped completely, revealing the desperation underneath. I know what you said to him. I know what you offered. Clark leaned back in his leather chair, savoring the moment. And what exactly do you think I offered? Investment money with strings attached. Some kind of trap. A trap? Kate, I'm hurt. I thought you'd be pleased that I'm considering your suggestion about expanding into the restaurant business. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything neither was saying directly. I'm coming home, Kate said finally. We're going to settle this tonight. Looking forward to it. 20 minutes later, Kate's Mercedes pulled into their circular driveway with enough speed to spray gravel across the manicured lawn. She entered through the front door, her heels clicking angrily against the marble foyer as she made her way to Clark's study. She looked magnificent in her fury, hair disheveled from running her hands through it, designer dress wrinkled from hours of nervous pacing, green eyes blazing with a combination of fear and defiance that reminded Clark why he'd fallen in love with her 15 years ago. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded, not bothering with pretense. Clark gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit down, Kate. I'll stand. Sit. Down. Something in his tone made her legs fold involuntarily into the chair. Clark studied her face, noting the subtle signs of stress, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she kept touching her wedding ring, the defensive set of her shoulders. Maverick called you after our meeting, Clark said. It wasn't a question. He's terrified. You threatened him. I made him a business offer. Very generous terms, actually. Kate's laugh was bitter. Generous? You're planning to destroy him. Why would I destroy someone I'm investing in? That would be bad business. Stop lying to me. Kate's voice cracked with emotion. I know what you're doing. I know what you're planning. You found out about us, and now you want revenge. Clark set down his pen and gave Kate his full attention. Tell me about US, Kate. I'm curious about your perspective. Don't make me say it. Say what? You know what? I know many things, but I want to hear you say it. Kate's hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white with tension. I've been seeing Maverick. Seeing him, we've been having an affair. The words came out in a rush, followed by immediate defensive justification. But it's not what you think. I never meant for it to happen. We were friends in college, and when we reconnected. When was that? 8 months ago. At Cora Hammond's charity gala. And you've been fucking him twice a week since then. Kate flinched at the crude language. It wasn't supposed to be about sex. I was lonely, Clark. You're always working, always focused on business. I felt invisible in my own marriage. So you solved your loneliness by betraying our family. I solved it by finding someone who actually wanted to spend time with me. Kate's voice gained strength as she shifted into attack mode. When was the last time you asked about my day? When was the last time we had dinner together without you checking your phone? When was the last time you looked at me like I was more than just another asset to manage? Clark absorbed her words without visible reaction. Are you in love with him? The question clearly surprised her. Yes. I think I am. And he's in love with you? Yes. Enough to risk everything he's built. Kate hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. What do you mean? I mean your lover boy is about to sign contracts that will put his entire life in my hands. His restaurants, his house, his mother's restaurant in Miami, everything staked against my investment. Clark's smile was coldly amused. If he truly loves you, that seems like a remarkable risk to take. You're bluffing. Maverick would never. Clark turned his laptop screen toward her, displaying the contracts Maverick had already initialed in 3 places. He's meeting with his attorney tomorrow morning. If the lawyer clears the terms, he'll sign Monday afternoon. Kate stared at the screen, her face cycling through disbelief, understanding, and growing horror. You're going to bankrupt him. I'm going to give him every opportunity to succeed. Whether he does or not depends entirely on his business acumen and your willingness to sabotage him. Kate, I'm a businessman. I don't sabotage investments. That would be throwing away my own money. She studied his face, searching for tells she'd learned to read over 15 years of marriage. What she found there made her sink deeper into her chair. Unless, she said slowly, destroying him is worth more to you than the money. Now you're beginning to understand how this works. Kate closed her eyes, her composure finally cracking completely. What do you want from me? The same thing I've always wanted. Loyalty, honesty, respect. I can give you that. We can work through this. Go to counseling, rebuild. No. Clark's interruption was gentle but absolute. You can't give me those things, Kate. You proved that over the past 8 months. Then what? Clark opened his desk drawer and withdrew a manila envelope, sliding it across to her. Divorce papers. Very favorable terms, actually. You keep the house, half our joint savings, your car, and a substantial monthly settlement. In exchange, you waive any claim to my businesses or properties acquired before our marriage. Kate's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. And if I don't sign? Then we go to court, where my attorney will present evidence of your adultery, your attempts to manipulate me into financing your lover's business, and your systematic deception of our children. Clark's voice remained conversational. In that scenario, you'll be fortunate to keep your car. The kids will learn the truth either way. The only question is whether they learn it from you, with some dignity intact, or from court documents that detail every hotel room encounter you've had over the past 8 months. Kate stared at the papers, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt them. But you did hurt them. You hurt all of us. Clark stood, moving around the desk to perch on its edge directly in front of her. The difference is, I'm going to make sure there are consequences for those choices. And Maverick made his choice when he decided to pursue a married woman. Now he gets to live with the results. Kate looked up at her husband, and for a moment, Clark saw the young woman he'd married, frightened, vulnerable, realizing she'd lost something she could never get back. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo 8 months of betrayal. Clark returned to his chair, his voice softening slightly. You have until Monday to decide, Kate. Sign the papers and maintain some dignity, or fight me in court and lose everything. Either way, this marriage is over. Kate rose unsteadily, clutching the envelope to her chest. At the office door, she turned back. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Clark met her eyes with the cold certainty that had built his empire. No. After Kate left, Clark poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and returned to his financial analysis. Monday would bring signatures, contracts, and the beginning of the end for both his wife and her lover. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The trap was set, the prey was cornered, and justice was 3 days away. Chapter 7. The Execution. Monday morning arrived with the kind of October chill that promised winter, and Clark stood in his office watching the city wake up 40 floors below. At 9 a.m. sharp, Brian Cook called with confirmation that would reshape 2 lives forever. Kate signed the papers this morning, Brian reported. No changes, no negotiations. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. And Maverick? His attorney cleared the investment contracts. He's scheduled to sign at 2 p.m. in my office. Clark felt the familiar calm that preceded decisive action. Everything is in place. Every detail. The subsidiary companies are established, the bank accounts are active, and the supply chain modifications go into effect tomorrow. Brian's voice carried professional admiration mixed with personal concern. Clark, what you've engineered here is brilliant, but nothing. They made their choices 8 months ago. Today they learn what those choices cost. After ending the call, Clark reviewed the timeline one final time. By tomorrow evening, Maverick would own 3 restaurants in Miami backed by Clark's investment. By next week, those restaurants would be struggling with supply chain issues, permit delays, and staffing problems. By Christmas, Maverick would be desperate to keep his business afloat. By spring, he would lose everything. At 2 p.m., Clark stood at his office window watching the street 40 floors below, knowing that 12 blocks away, Maverick Ruiz was signing documents that would destroy his life. The irony wasn't lost on him. While Kate was packing her belongings and preparing to move to her sister's house in Atlanta, her lover was enthusiastically embracing his own destruction. Clark's phone buzzed with a text from Otto. MR signed all documents. Looked very pleased with himself. Another text followed immediately. KB loaded her car. Spoke briefly with Lola on the front lawn. Rowan not present. Clark typed back. Continue surveillance on MR only. KB is no longer a priority. At 6 p.m., Clark returned home to find Lola sitting on the front steps, still in her school uniform, but with the tie loosened and blazer draped over her knees. His daughter looked older than her 17 years, her gray eyes reflecting a weariness that came from watching her family implode. Mom's gone, she said simply. I know. She wanted to say goodbye to you, but you weren't answering your phone. Clark sat beside his daughter on the stone steps, looking out at the lawn where Kate had spent countless hours planning gardens that would now bloom for someone else. What did she tell you? That she made mistakes that hurt everyone she loved. That she was sorry. That she hoped someday we might understand. Lola picked at the hem of her skirt. She didn't tell me about the affair, but she didn't have to. I've known for months. And how do you feel about her leaving? Lola was quiet for a long moment, watching leaves drift across the circular driveway. Relieved mostly. The last few months have been horrible. All the lying, the tension, the fake smiles at dinner. At least now everyone can stop pretending. What about Rowan? Rowan's angry at you. He thinks you drove her away out of jealousy or pride or some masculine ego thing. Lola's voice carried a maturity that surprised Clark. He doesn't understand that she drove herself away the moment she chose someone else over her family. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the oak trees that lined their property. Finally, Lola spoke again. What happens to her boyfriend? Clark's smile was sharp. Maverick just signed contracts that put his entire life in my hands. He thinks he's getting away with stealing my wife and my money. He's about to learn how wrong he is. Good. The single word, spoken with quiet venom, reminded Clark that Lola was very much his daughter. The next 3 weeks unfolded exactly as Clark had orchestrated. Maverick's Miami restaurants opened to great fanfare, attracting positive reviews and healthy crowds. But behind the scenes, Clark's network was methodically dismantling every support system that kept the business operational. Health inspectors found violations that required expensive corrections. Permits that should have been routine took weeks to process. Key suppliers experienced mysterious delivery delays. The restaurant's carefully cultivated social media presence was quietly sabotaged by negative reviews from accounts that appeared legitimate but were actually managed by Otto's associates. By the end of November, Maverick was working 18-hour days trying to keep his empire from collapsing. His calls to Clark went unanswered. His attempts to restructure his debt were blocked by contractual clauses he hadn't fully understood when he signed them. On December 15th, Otto delivered the surveillance report Clark had been waiting for. "He's broken," Otto said, sliding photos across Clark's desk. "Lost 15 pounds, barely sleeping, drinking heavily. His staff is jumping ship, his investors are nervous, and his mother's restaurant is mortgaged to the hilt to cover his Miami losses." The photos showed a man Clark barely recognized. Maverick's confident swagger had collapsed into desperate exhaustion. His expensive clothes hung loose on his diminished frame. His eyes carried the hollow look of someone who had finally realized he was trapped. "Perfect," Clark said. "Set up the meeting." They met at Coastal, Maverick's flagship restaurant in Charleston, on a gray December afternoon when rain drummed against the windows and the dining room sat nearly empty. Maverick appeared 10 minutes late, his hands shaking slightly as he joined Clark at the same corner table where they'd first discussed the Miami investment. "You wanted to see me," Maverick said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Clark studied the broken man across from him, noting the changes that 3 months of systematic destruction had wrought. "How's business, Maverick? You know how business is. You planned every fucking detail. I provided capital for a promising venture. If you're experiencing operational difficulties, cut the act, Bennett. We both know what you've done." Clark leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "What I've done is give you every opportunity to prove you were worthy of my investment. You failed. You sabotaged me. I taught you a lesson about consequences." Clark's smile was razor-thin. "Did you really think you could destroy my marriage, steal my wife, and manipulate me into funding your escape without paying a price?" Maverick's composure finally cracked completely. "She was unhappy, Clark. Your marriage was already broken before I came along. My marriage was mine to fix or destroy. You made it your business, so I made your business mine. What do you want?" Clark withdrew a document from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "I'm calling in my investment. $2.5 million, due in 30 days, as specified in the contracts you signed." Maverick stared at the paper as if it were a death sentence. "You know I can't pay that. Then you'll forfeit the collateral. Your restaurants, your house, your mother's restaurant." Clark's voice carried no emotion. "Everything you value will become mine. My mother's restaurant has been in our family for 40 years. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to fuck my wife." Maverick's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment Clark thought the younger man might actually swing at him. But the fight had been beaten out of him over months of watching his life systematically dismantled. "Kate doesn't even know what you've done, does she?" Maverick's voice was bitter with understanding. "She thinks she got away clean. She has no idea you've been destroying me piece by piece. Kate made her choice when she chose you. Now she gets to live with the consequences of that choice, including watching what happens to men who betray Clark Bennett." Clark stood, straightening his suit jacket with practiced precision. "You have 30 days, Maverick. After that, everything you've worked for becomes mine. But look on the bright side. You'll finally understand what it feels like to lose everything that matters." As Clark walked toward the restaurant's exit, Maverick called after him. "What if I fight you in court? Challenge the contracts?" Clark paused at the door, not bothering to turn around. "With what money? From which law firm? Using which assets as collateral?" He glanced back over his shoulder. "I own you now, Maverick. The sooner you accept that, the easier the next 30 days will be." Outside, rain had turned to sleet, coating the city in ice that made every surface treacherous. Clark walked carefully to his car, thinking about how appropriate the weather was for the day he had finally cornered the last piece of prey in his carefully constructed trap. In 30 days, Maverick Ruiz would lose everything he had spent his adult life building. Kate would learn that her choices had consequences that reached far beyond her own life. And Clark would have completed the most satisfying business transaction of his career. Some lessons, he reflected, were worth more than money. They were worth everything. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on January 15th, exactly 30 days after Clark had delivered Maverick's ultimatum. He answered on the second ring despite the late hour, having expected this moment with the patience of a hunter who knows his prey is cornered. "Clark." Kate's voice was raw with exhaustion and something that might have been desperation. "We need to talk." "It's almost 3 in the morning, Kate." Maverick lost everything. The restaurants, his house, his mother's place in Miami. Her words came in a rush, as if speaking quickly might somehow make them less real. "He says you orchestrated it all." He says you've been destroying him systematically for months. Clark sat up in bed, reaching for the lamp switch. Maverick made poor business decisions. I can't be held responsible for his failures. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not about this. The exhaustion in her voice told Clark everything he needed to know. Kate had finally put the pieces together, had finally understood the true scope of what she had set in motion when she chose Maverick over her family. Where are you calling from? Atlanta. I've been staying with my sister. Kate's voice broke slightly. Maverick came here yesterday. He's completely broken, Clark. He looks like he hasn't eaten in weeks. He keeps talking about killing himself. That would be unfortunate. Suicide is a permanent solution to temporary problems. Temporary. Kate's voice rose to nearly a shout. You destroyed his entire life. His mother is 83 years old and homeless because of what you did. Clark felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. His mother is homeless because her son made catastrophically poor decisions. I offered him a business opportunity. If he couldn't manage it properly, you set him up to fail. I gave him every chance to succeed. The fact that he couldn't rise to the challenge says more about him than it does about me. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything that had been destroyed over the past year. When Kate spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Why? Why did you have to destroy him too? Wasn't losing me enough punishment? Clark stood and walked to his bedroom window, looking out at the winter landscape that surrounded his house. The house Kate had once shared with him, had once filled with her laughter and dreams and betrayals. You don't understand, Kate. You never did. This was never about punishment. This was about consequences. What's the difference? Punishment is emotional, random, disproportionate. Clark's voice remained steady, professorial. Consequences are logical, inevitable. They teach lessons that prevent future mistakes. What lesson could possibly be worth destroying an innocent man's life? Clark's laugh was cold. Innocent. Kate, your innocent lover pursued a married woman, manipulated her into deceiving her family, and then tried to use her to steal money from her husband. Which part of that strikes you as innocent? He loved me. He used you. Just like you used our children to cover your lies. Just like you tried to use me to fund his business. Clark's voice hardened. The only difference is, I was better at it than either of you. Kate was crying now, her sobs audible over the phone connection. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I've said that. That I made mistakes? I know I did. That I hurt people I loved? I know that too. I want you to understand something very clearly, Clark said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Every choice has consequences. For 8 months, you made choices that betrayed our marriage, our family, and everything we built together. For 8 months, you thought you could lie, cheat, and manipulate without paying a price. And now you're learning what that price is. Not just for you, but for everyone who helped you pay it. More silence, broken only by Kate's ragged breathing. The kids are fine. Lola understands exactly what happened and why. She's stronger for it. What about Rowan? Clark hesitated for the first time in their conversation. His son had spent Christmas break at Duke, refusing to come home or speak to his father beyond terse text messages about logistics. The boy was struggling with the collapse of his worldview, and Clark knew the next few months would determine whether Rowan emerged stronger or remained broken. Rowan will figure it out eventually. Or he won't. That's his choice to make. He's your son. He was my son when he stood in a courtroom and called me a monster. When he chose to believe your lies over 15 years of my actions. When he decided that defending your betrayal was more important than loyalty to his family. Clark's voice remained steady, but Kate could hear the steel underneath. I gave him every opportunity to understand the truth. He chose to reject it. So you'll just cut him off? Forever. I'll give him the same thing I gave you and Maverick. Consequences for his choices. If he wants to rebuild our relationship, he knows where to find me. But it will be on my terms, not his. Kate was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a new quality, not just exhaustion or desperation, but a kind of terrible understanding. You're never going to forgive any of us, are you? Forgiveness is earned, Kate. None of you has even begun to try. What would it take? The question surprised Clark. He considered it seriously, running through scenarios and possibilities in his mind. Nothing you're capable of giving, he said finally. Forgiveness requires trust, and trust requires consistency over time. You spent 8 months proving you're not capable of either. So this is it. This is how it ends. This is how you chose for it to end. Clark moved away from the window, suddenly tired of the conversation. You made your bed, Kate. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. Clark. He ended the call and turned off his phone, settling back into bed with the satisfaction of a man who had finally closed the books on a business transaction that had taken too long to complete. Outside, sleet continued to coat the world in ice, making everything sharp and unforgiving. Clark smiled in the darkness and went back to sleep. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. Spring arrived early that year, coating the city in the kind of green that promised renewal and second chances. Clark stood in his office, reading the final report from Otto Thompson with the detached interest of a general reviewing casualty figures from a war he had already won. Maverick Ruiz had declared bankruptcy in February. His mother's restaurant in Miami had been sold to cover debts. The man himself had disappeared somewhere in the Southwest, reportedly working construction jobs under an assumed name. Kate remained in Atlanta, working part-time at her sister's boutique and living in the guest room of a house she had once considered beneath her standards. But it was the final item in Otto's report that brought Clark the deepest satisfaction. Rowan had withdrawn from Duke University. The phone call came that afternoon, Clark's son's voice strained and formal over the connection. I heard about Maverick, Rowan said without preamble. Did you? Mom called me yesterday. She's not doing well. Clark waited, offering no comfort or condemnation. I also heard about the college payments, Rowan continued. My tuition account was closed last month. Your mother assured me she could handle your educational expenses. Since she chose to prioritize her new relationship over her family's financial obligations, I saw no reason to continue subsidizing her decisions. So I'm being punished because she had an affair? Clark's voice remained steady, professional. You're experiencing consequences because you chose to support someone who betrayed our family. Actions have results, Rowan. I taught you that when you were 12 years old. I was trying to be loyal to Mom. You were trying to avoid making a difficult choice. There's a difference. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything neither was willing to say directly. What do I have to do? Rowan asked finally. For what? To come home. To fix this. Clark considered the question seriously. His son's voice carried something new, not the entitled anger of Christmas, but the humility that came from understanding consequences weren't theoretical concepts. You stood in a divorce courtroom and called me a monster, Clark said quietly. You chose to believe 8 months of your mother's lies over 15 years of my actions. You decided that defending betrayal was more important than supporting the man who built everything you've ever benefited from. I was wrong. Being wrong isn't the problem, Rowan. Being wrong is human. Refusing to accept responsibility for being wrong, continuing to defend people who used you to enable their betrayal, choosing loyalty to deception over loyalty to truth, those are character flaws. So what do you want from me? I want you to prove you understand the difference between loyalty and enabling. I want you to prove you can recognize betrayal when you see it, even when it comes from people you love. And I want you to prove you understand that trust, once broken, must be rebuilt through consistent action over time. How do I do that? Clark looked out his office window at the city he had helped build, thinking about second chances and the price of earning them. Come home. Finish your degree at the local university. Work in the business, starting at the bottom, like everyone else. Prove over the next 2 years that you can be trusted with responsibilities that matter. Show me you understand the value of loyalty, consistency, and truth. And then we'll see if you've learned anything worth knowing. That evening, Clark stood in his kitchen preparing dinner for two. A simple meal of grilled salmon and roasted vegetables that Lola had requested. His daughter moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, setting the table and opening a bottle of wine with the casual competence of someone who had grown up quickly over the past year. Rowan called me today, she said without preamble. He's coming home next week. I know. Are you going to forgive him? Clark considered the question while plating their dinner. Forgiveness isn't something you give someone, Lola. It's something you earn through consistent behavior over time. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Clark joined his daughter at the kitchen table, noting how much older she looked than her 18 years. Your brother chose to defend betrayal over loyalty. If he wants to rebuild our relationship, he needs to prove he understands why that was wrong. And if he can't, then he'll live with the consequences of that choice, just like everyone else. Lola studied her father's face, reading the resolve that had built an empire and destroyed everyone who had challenged it. "Sometimes I worry you're too hard on people," she said quietly. "Hard isn't cruel, Lola. Hard is holding people accountable for their choices. Hard is refusing to enable behavior that destroys trust." Clark met his daughter's eyes. "Your mother and Maverick wanted the benefits of betrayal without paying the costs. Your brother wanted to defend lies without accepting responsibility for supporting them. I simply made sure they understood that every choice has consequences, even the choice to be too hard on people." Clark smiled, recognizing his own analytical nature reflected in his daughter's question. "Even that choice. If I'm wrong about Rowan, if I'm too rigid to recognize genuine change, then I'll pay the price of losing a relationship with my son. That's a consequence I'm prepared to accept." They ate in comfortable silence, father and daughter united by their understanding of a world where actions mattered more than intentions, where trust was earned through consistency, and where betrayal came with a price that could never be negotiated away. Later that night, Clark stood on his balcony looking out at the city lights, thinking about the past year and the lessons it had taught everyone involved. Kate had learned that comfortable marriages could be destroyed by the pursuit of passion. Maverick had learned that using people carried risks that extended far beyond the immediate relationship. Rowan was learning that loyalty was a choice that required consistent action, not just emotional sympathy. And Clark had learned something too, that the price of betrayal wasn't just paid by those who betrayed, but by everyone who enabled, defended, or ignored it. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Rowan. I'll be home Sunday. Thank you for giving me another chance." Clark read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered. In 3 hours, his son would begin the long process of proving whether he had learned anything from watching his family destroy itself, or whether he was simply another person who thought consequences were negotiable. Clark smiled and went inside, already planning the lessons Rowan would learn over the next 2 years. Some education, he reflected, was worth more than any diploma. And some prices, once paid, taught lessons that lasted a lifetime. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.